We're going to have a panel discussion now about deploying TETRA to manage crisis situations. Well, the TETRA Association has worked with several of the major public safety networks in Europe in the last year and put on 2 full-day events to talk about these issues. We're going to try to do them in 20 minutes. So let's start straight away, and I would like to ask Janne to just very quickly introduce yourself, please.
I'm Janne Koivukoski from Finnish Ministry of the Interior, and somebody of you know me better. I was earlier the head of the Virve when we constructed Virve, and I was also the head of Finnish Emergency Response Center, 112 Center administration, and I have been involved in...
well, we'll come to that, Jan, if I can interrupt.
Yeah.
Okay, and I'll just ask Giza to introduce himself as well, please.
I'm local. I'm a Hungarian police colonel working as the head of the logistical and supply section of the Hungarian National Police Headquarters, and I'm the former project manager of our Hungarian governmental TETRA project.
Thank you very much. Thank you. We've heard from you already about what happened in that horrible train crash in Brussels, near Brussels last year. I wondered if any of the other members of the panel could recount any sort of similar instance. We're faced with a world where there's terrorist incidents, where there's social unrest, and where there's natural disasters. And I wondered if any of you had any experience of TETRA being used in those sorts of environments. And I'm going to, if I may, start with you, Janne.
Actually, we have had several severe accidents, but not very big catastrophes in Finland since we started TETRA use. But of course, when we have used TETRA over 10 years in operative use in Finland, we have had several big cases where several different authorities has been involved, and we have had, for example, those school shootings in Finland, 2 different cases where several people were dead, and there were thousands of people involved in those cases, and TETRA played very essential role in communication because it was the only network which worked on those cases. And yesterday somebody of you heard about those storms last year which we had in Finland, where all the commercial networks were down, but our TETRA network was in use, and we could handle all those accidents and emergencies during these storms. And actually we had at the same time 1,000 Lakes rally in Finland, where we have over 1,000 TETRA terminals in use for security purposes for that rally, and those also were used at the same time, and there was no troubles at all.
That's good news. I'll come back to you. Jan, I know that you are always in the Caribbean. Do they have similar sorts of issues?
Well, I'm not always in the Caribbean, Phil. Sometimes, that's true. Maybe you all know that the Netherlands still has some colonies. Well, it's not really colonies, but part of the Netherlands is also some islands in the Dutch Caribbean. And it doesn't rain that often, but if it rains, it really rains. And for example, in November last year, we had real flooding. It only rained for 6 hours on the island of Curaçao, but there was a huge flooding there. Well, the TETRA network we operate there, we didn't make the mistake to put all base stations low. They're all on high places and completely self-supporting. It's including microwave and all generators. And when I got up in the morning, there were some areas of the city of Willemstad with at least 1 meter of water in it, also in the shops and in the residential areas. And finally, it came out that the 2 GSM networks they have didn't work anymore. The only network that still worked was our TETRA network. For that point, the police needed some extra radios. They have about 500 there, and they need an extra 50. So we programmed very quickly using dynamic group number assignment, a very nice TETRA feature. We programmed 50 new radios for them, so they could use them, and that was very nice. And actually the only site, there was one site not operational at that time, and that was not because of the water, that was because the generator didn't start. But when we got there at 8:30 in the morning, we started the generator manually, and then actually the only communication that was possible was our TETRA network.
Ole, do you have any experience in the control room world with this sort of thing?
Yes, I think we can learn from what has happened in Finland and in a number of other countries like Britain with a well-designed TETRA network. That is, that even at very big disasters, it's very, very seldom that capacity has been a problem in the TETRA networks. And it is, of course, because that push-to-talk communication is so extremely efficiently when we measure it in Erlang. So compared to what we are doing at a normal GSM network, we get a lot of communication out of the TETRA network with group communication and push-to-talk. When we are looking at the control room side, I should say we are learning that voice communication is a real important thing when things happening fast. When you have an explosion, when you have a electricity power plant going mad and things like that, you are not writing big reports. What you're doing is you're talking and you're instructing your people on what to do. So I personally must say, I think we will see, based on this, more and more data, but voice will never disappear.
Geezer, what about your experience in Hungary? You've had some real nasty...
Unfortunately, I have a very concrete example how to handle a crisis situation using our TETRA. What happened at the beginning of this year, a very special industrial catastrophe at the western part of Hungary within an aluminium factory. You have to know that pollution of the aluminium factory and aluminium making is the so-called red sludge, which is not so toxic, not so dangerous, but nothing to do with them, only store. Practically the storage of this red sludge is natural, like a water storage, closed with a dam. And even in this year, this dam is crashed and became a very special red sludge flood across the valley concerning 3 villages and just several numbers. The speed of the flood was 70 kilometers per hour, 10 people killed, 150 people injured, approximately 200 buildings collapsed, and 700 people evacuated during 3 days. So we have to organize a multi-agency operation and to organize the communication within the agencies together. So I will tell you the details later.
Thank you. When we had these workshops, as I said, with looking at some of the specific examples, and one was the Turkish airline crash that you will remember in the Netherlands. And actually, not everything went as well as we might have hoped. And the workshops were to look at what were the problems. Were they technology or were they something else? Well, I'm pleased to say we don't think it was technology, but I think Yves has already put up these 3 axes, the capacity, the preparedness, and the procedure. Priorities. I wondered if you could just briefly remind us of the lessons you got out of the train crash and what advice you would give to other people when they're preparing for these things that we hope never happen.
This is quite important
to have a good preparation of events, of catastrophe. Even if you cannot prepare everything, you should be able to anticipate something. And in Belgium, it's organized at provincial level, and what we have is what we call the provincial plans, where we try to anticipate this kind of situation. And also in those situations, it's not only the plan itself which is important, but as for Maastricht, from the operator point of view, the communication procedures have also to be taken into account. And this is quite important to address this issue, so that you know that you have always limited capacity and that you have to change your way of communication when you are operating in such a catastrophe. Because if you are not trying to work as usual in this crisis situation, communication will be a crisis too. And also on this aspect, you can anticipate by making a good fleet map. So this is the way you handle the toll groups, the way which group should be handled, should be operational when you have this kind of incident. And also based on the third axe is the priority. So as I said, in Belgium we have different kind of users. We have public safety, but also semi-private companies. And you have to be able to say, okay, public safety as priority when it's needed. Even if among user organizations the priorities are the same, you can always, when you have different type of user, try to put some priorities and avoid people not being so important in the ending of the catastrophe to be present on the network and to use the capacity which is not needed. Also, priorities from group call compared to individual calls. As I said, individual call is consuming a lot of capacity on your network and is not efficient at all when you are speaking about a catastrophe.
Any other comments from any of the other guys on what you've just heard from here?
We have done our fleet map 3 times during this 12 years. We have used Virve in Finland, and actually every time the reason has been that you mentioned. We have learned how to use TETRA, and actually I would say that now we know it, and it's actually, as you've said, so you have to train, you have to learn people to use the fleet map, and it has been the daily business to use it certain way, and if you have good preparations and learned people to use that, there wouldn't be any big troubles in the crisis.
Is that the same experience in Hungary, Giza?
Yes, so I have 3 points. First, of course, the plans. To have communication plans, such kind of situations. And using these plans, we have to have special folders with all the terminals for the multi-agency communications, territory by territory, to be ready to handle very quick the communication of such kind of special situations. And secondly, the role of the virtual private network managers, because in such kind of multi-agency operations, the VPN managers must to handle the concrete situation within the TETRA network, to kick out the wrong terminals, to forbid the individual calls, etc., etc. So basically the same, of course.
Yeah, in Denmark we have got made by the Danish police and the Sine Secretariat a communication structure and architecture which defines what groups are allowed to talk with each other. And it clearly shows that the training in using these things is very important. Because I think we all understand that it is not enough that we can all shout to each other. That will just give us chaos. But the different organizations they are reluctant to allow other organizations, people to enter into their groups. So there is a tendency that there will be a gateway officer who will be the guy who are talking to other organizations. And I personally think that training, as we are seeing it being offered here at the exhibition area with simulation and so on, is very important to train these interdisciplinary scenarios so we know how to work with each other. Especially the different ways you react is not the same in military as it is in police and firefighters. So it's not only about the physical communication channel, it's all the doctrines and so on that has to be adjusted, agreed upon, and really trained and trained.
Before I ask you for any comments, and I want to pick up on that, and I think it's the same thing that's been echoed here. We're saying that, well, I think I'm promoting around the world shared networks are a good thing. You have virtual, discrete networks for your own operations, and then when a disaster happens, you can come together in a predefined format, if you like, with predefined talk groups, and you can cooperate. And that's good stuff. But, I mean, you were saying yourself that on your network you have some people who aren't public safety, and maybe in a crisis situation they're going to lose some of their communications. But who says that's the case? In the UK, where I come from, we have a commercial operator. Is it the commercial operator that says, we're not giving you any communications today because the police need it? Is it the government that says that, or is it the police that says that? Or, how is that organised? Is it just something that's done there and then, or do you have to sit down as a committee, if you like, and agree all this in advance? How does it work in practice?
In Belgium, as I said, we have a user committee where we have most of the important public and safety user organizations which are represented. And those organizations are giving advice to the minister to say, okay, when a new private company went to enter the network, because it's interesting for us, it's up to the user committee to make an advice to the minister to say, okay, I think those companies can have access to the network. But this is a general principle. When there is a catastrophe, when there is a crisis, the priorities are higher for public safety than for the private companies. So this is the rules that are settled from the beginning when somebody wants to use a network. But okay, in most of the case, let's say in crisis does not occur every day, the available capacity is enough to cope with the needs of everybody. And perhaps also to add that even if those people do not have the ability to work amongst each other in the private company work on a day-to-day basis, they have joined our group with public and safety in order to be also involved, if needed, when there is a need to make use of those private company, a utility of a gas company, something should be interesting. Even if the priorities are low, the group calls that are joined between those companies could help to solve the issue.
Is that the views of you all, or have you got anything to add to that?
Well, in our network, as you know, the Caribbean is a very small island. There's only one trunk radio network, and that's operated by us and used by both public safety and non-public safety organizations. And also with us, the non-public safety organizations have very low priority in the network, and the public safety has a very high priority in the network. But even in cases of crisis, the normal users, as you can say, the non-public safety users will still work. And although the public safety users will have higher priority, if you be sure that your capacity is high enough, then you don't have a problem with that. And that's exactly what we did in our network. So that's important. Capacity is very important.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah.
Yeah. I think when you look into the Astrid network as it started and the C2000, and forgive me speaking of something I did not do, but you saw networks that were planned to have a quite better coverage than the old analog networks who were there before. But as the private GSM network spread out, people became so accustomed that mobile worked down in the basements in the city centers. And therefore, the demands for the public safety networks of coverage has been much, much harder than they were designed to do originally. So when you have seen the expansions in Holland for C2000 and in Astrid, the main goal of doing it was to give better physical coverage. And that means my point that we should have as many users on these networks as possible, because the capacity is growing much faster with the number of base stations you launch to have the coverage. You get more people to pay for it. You get more daily use, so you know exactly the condition of your network. So based and combined what my colleague here just said about the priorities for the private users of their network, the very nice levels of priorities we have in TETRA and not the very hard ones. That is really the virtue of it, and therefore we should all work, simply have to much more users, it will give more capacity, and it will give more security that it works when we really need it.
Yes, please, Keith.
We have also a private company owned and private company operated system. It's a multi-agency system, but there is a dedicated governmental agency for telecommunication. This agency is the central VPN manager and the only decision maker in such kind of situations. So it is company owned, company operated, but the decision maker is a governmental agency.
Yeah. Listen, gents, we've run out of time, but are there just one last sentence you'd like to say? Anything that you think that's just important to flag up before we go? If not, we'll close. But if there is anything, your last opportunity, please.
Once again, I have to push on having more and more users. It will help us all. The more equipment we get out there, the lower we will have the prices. Think about the GSM. We should be able to reach the same level of terminal prices, but we need higher numbers of users.
Any last comments from anybody else?
I would say that voice is essential, but there has been a lot of talking about broadband and the future of TETRA or something else broadband, but I would say that the TETRA 1 and the narrowband data transmission is also very essential, and all the applications must be that kind of that in some very bad crisis or in everyday use we have to transfer all the data via also this very narrow band, and that's why the applications must be that smart that we can do it by those applications.
Thank you. Okay, thank you very much, gentlemen. Before you clap, as I said, we've run a couple of workshops on this, so there are many and some quite complex issues involved in using TETRA in crisis situations. It is successful, but there are some issues, and we've touched on some of them today. Who does priority, making sure you have, et cetera, et cetera. You can read the reports of those workshops. They're available on the TETRA Association website in a number of languages. So you please help yourself and have a look. So I'd just like to thank the members of the panel for their contributions today. So thank you very much, gents.